Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is a collaboration between the Clean Energy Business Council and Fuel Cell Innovations and Partners. This is titled Removing 100% of the UAE's Past and Future Scope-3 Emissions while Building a New Energy Industry. At the Clean Energy Business Council, we are very committed to serving as a platform that informs, supports and facilitates discussions around innovative technologies that can drive sustainable transformation. So today's session is very much about demonstrating what could be possible. The Gigaton Carbon Removal Initiative represents a groundbreaking approach to tackling Scope 3 emissions, a crucial yet challenging component of net zero targets. Through scalable technologies like high-temperature fuel cells and solid oxide electrolysis, this initiative aims to show a feasible path forward, turning carbon removal from concept to reality. So in terms of the agenda, in today's session, we'll have some opening perspectives from both the CEBC and FCI on the transformative potential of this particular initiative for the UAE and beyond. An in-depth look at how advanced fuel cell technologies enable energy-positive carbon removal at scale. We will then go into a panel discussion with our experts that we have with us today, and they're going to share their insights on localizing these technologies and the initiative's economic implications. And then finally, we will finish off with a Q&A session, and that will give you a chance to engage directly with all of our speakers. So we do encourage you to please use the Q&A box to submit all of your questions throughout, and we'll address as many as we can at the end. Any questions that we don't get around to covering during the webinar today, we will endeavour to get back to you individually. And we are encouraging open discussion about all of the possibilities of this technology. So thank you for joining us today to explore some practical, actionable solutions for carbon management. And with that, I'm very pleased to hand over to Dr. Nasser Saidi, who is the founder and chair of the Clean Energy Business Council, for his own welcome and opening remarks. Thank you, Dr. Saidi.
Thank you all for joining us. These are fascinating times. We're going to listen a bit later to a technology that would help us in decarbonization. And I want you to keep in mind that we're going towards COP29 soon, and we are going to look at policies as well as technologies. Everybody's committed to net zero. Everybody's committed to decarbonization. But how do you go about it? It's one thing to have the policies, but you have to make the investments. And when we talk about Scope 3 emissions, we're no longer talking about, say, what a company itself emits, say, Scope 1, or Scope 2, where it looks at a wider supply chain, the effects of its products on greenhouse emissions. It has to look now over the lifetime of the supply chain and what it does. And then you're still left with what do you achieve? How do you deal with it on a global scale or a national scale? What do you do about the carbon that has already been emitted? That is the bulk of it. And you might add a little bit every year, but the bulk is still there. Can we do something about it? So I think what's very interesting about our discussion today with Fuel Cell Innovations, a Korean-based company, but now international, is it's looking at the technologies that we could practically use. And in particular, when we think about the Gulf countries and the UAE, can we adopt these types of technologies? So I won't spend more time on that, but just to remind everybody that the CBC is a platform. It brings in partners from both the public sector and the private sector. We are there to have open discussions, and this is really one of them. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce Rashad Itani next, who will take us through the webinar. And just a reminder, of course, this is being recorded. You can send us your questions online. So please be engaged as much as possible. Thank you. Open to you, Rashad.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Saidi. It's a pleasure and an honor to be not only a partner member of the CEBC, but to join you on the same platform to present what will be a challenging set of ideas and information that many will not have encountered before. But this thing has been more than 10 years in the making. Our approach to removing CO2 from the atmosphere. We started writing our first paper on this 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, because of the challenge that at the time Richard Branson had launched he would pay $10 million to the first a proposal that would find a commercially viable solution to removing CO2 from the atmosphere. And this is what we've done, accomplished in the past 10 years. So let me go through a few slides as a support, and we will take it from there. And I will put it in presentation mode, and here we go. So the context first. The context is that global emissions in 2023.
Rashad, can I ask you to put it in full screen mode? You're in presenter mode as well, just so we can see the slides fully.
Then I should change. I have two screens. It's picking up the wrong screen probably. Let me put it
this
here.
This one looks okay. You can full screen.
We can see the full slide now.
Is this okay?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
So it has to be on the other screen. Excuse me. So the global emissions in 2023 were 37 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. This counts all the different greenhouse gases. Our initiative is to remove 1 gigaton per year of CO2, which will have repercussions that we will discuss in this webinar. This is equivalent to about 2.7% of global CO2 emissions in 2023. So it's a tiny fraction, but it's a good start, as you will see. The carbon removal has become already a large profitable market and will grow as we go along, because the need to remove carbon will become ever more apparent to more people as we go along. The current price of carbon removal certificates is about $120 per ton of CO2 removed. In our calculations, we use $10 to $50 per ton to be on the conservative side. And what these costs represent is a tax on exports to Europe, which can be avoided if we do something about it, if it's addressed at the exporting country. How large? We said is 1 gigaton of CO2. Already we know that it's 2.7% of global emissions. But the IPCC says that we have to remove 10 gigatons per year between today and 2050. At $10 per certificate, this represents a revenue of $10 billion. At $50, $50 billion, and at $120, that's $120 billion from the certificate sale alone. And within this context, the UAE's Scope-3 emissions are merely about half a gigaton. So if you remove, if you cause the removal, because this is not for one country to do it, but one country to cause it to be done all over the world, as you will see. And that means that every year you remove this year's total Scope-3 emissions and a previous year's total emissions. Where people see obstacles, entrepreneurs, as we all know, see opportunities. And Scope 3 emissions have been addressed until now as a cost by producing countries, by oil majors, by other companies. And as you will see when Dr. Ravani will give his presentation, large companies have already banded together or have started doing it on their own to remove their historical Scope 3, equivalent Scope 3 emissions. So what we will show is that instead of it being a cost, it's actually a source of income, both from the industrial side and from the sale of certificates. And on the industrial side, the approach using high temperature fuel cells is the only one that, coupled with BECCS, the biogas, the biomass derived fuel, is the only one that is actually produces power rather than consumes power, as all other methodologies used to date. And that's why we end up with a solution that produces revenues rather than represents a cost to countries or to companies. And of course, the available solutions are either natural forestry, ocean absorption, and all the rest, or you have to do it through technological means, carbon capture and sequestration. People speak a lot about direct air capture, but all of these solutions consume power, except for one, which is the BECCS one. And the BECCS, coupled with high temperature fuel cells, produces the cheapest carbon capture and removal that is available today. And today, BECCS already is removing 2.5 gigatons of CO2 from the atmosphere, the capacity that it has. The potential actually is 40 gigatons, so we have a while to go in order to achieve the aims that we are looking for. Now, are there enough high temperature fuel cells? These are solid oxide fuel cells, molten carbonate fuel cells, and others of the same type. They are currently deployed at gigawatt scale by Bloom. They are the choice of global leaders for hydrogen and ammonia production, as Topsoe, which is the largest electrolyzer in the world. They've announced that their future is in high temperature fuel cells, solid oxide electrolysis. And they are used for carbon capture by Exxon that recently signed a licensing agreement with a high temperature fuel cell company to use fuel cells to capture and remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Now, the idea is if the UAE adopts this technology, it would first create a major industry in the UAE to manufacture, export, and develop further high temperature technology. This is for power production and for carbon removal and separation. This is what Dr. Tae-Won Lee will show us as in a part of his presentation about both FCI and the fuel cell industry in Korea. And then the cost revenue impact will be discussed by Tobias Koch, who will touch upon the mechanisms and prices that carbon certificates called ITMOS, he will explain that, will generate when used as part of the integrated approach. So I'll hand over to Alberto Ravani to show us how the industry that he represents has been tackling their past and current emissions, given that the data center industry represents a fifth country, if you will, in the world in terms of emissions. And if they can do it, then a country or oil-producing country or an oil company can do it also. So Alberto, up to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rashad. So I'm speaking for the Net Zero Innovation Hub, which is an initiative of data center industry leaders to accelerate the transition to net zero, and at the same time to support the industry incredible growth driven by AI of the last year. So data center operators like Google and Microsoft, Data4, and solution providers, large solution providers like Schneider, Vertiv, and Danfoss, they cooperate to validate and scale innovative solutions to decarbonize data centers. Why this? Why is this so important? Well, as Rashad just said, if data center was a nation, if the data center industry was a nation, it would rank number 9 in electricity consumption between England and France. Well, actually, that was 2022. In 2026, it will grow to rank number 5. It will pass Germany, Canada, and it will be only behind Japan, India, US, and China. So it definitely, this industry is as relevant as a nation, just for the power consumption, independently for everything else what they're doing, which we use every day. By the way, it is us, everybody of us who are using today this tool and phone. We are contributing to this growth. The data center leaders are committed to decarbonize the industry and to reach net zero. And the question is, yes, are they planning to do it? What is their plan to do it? So two relevant examples. Google, they are planning to do it. Let's say they are planning not to do it with offsets. And that's an important discussion, just a note to be done. Google was carbon neutral in 2007 with offsets. But carbon neutrality doesn't mean that you're not emitting carbon. If your data center is close to a coal power plant, you can have all the offsets you want. You can buy all the renewable power you want, but at night, and when there is no wind, that data center will run on coal power from that power plant. So the solution to that's why even after in 2017, after having purchased 100% electricity from renewable sources, another incredible milestone, Google decided to go, Google and Microsoft and more of the data center industry, they're going for 24/7 time matched, which means you buy the power where you are, it must be renewable at the right place, at the right time. And then you are sure you are not emitting more emissions. And this is difficult. And for the residual emissions, which cannot be done this way, also Google moved to carbon removal. Okay, so carbon removal is one of the pillars of the strategy of Google to reach real net zero, usually by 2030, like Microsoft. Second example, they are actually the leaders in carbon removal. They have put in 1 billion in a climate innovation fund. They pledge and plan to be net zero by 2030. And as you can see, it's net zero by 2030 using carbon removals, because the blue part on top, those are the emissions which are very difficult to reduce. Of course, first one does efficiency, so reduce emission as much as possible. And what you cannot reduce, it will remove. That's a strategy. And so there is a plan in increasing carbon removal. And by 2030, Microsoft plans to be net zero. By 2050, let's say, so after 2030, Microsoft will be carbon negative. And by 2050, the pledge is to have removed all the entire emissions since the company was founded in 1975. It's a bold and inspiring statement. and gave Microsoft this leadership position in the decarbonization efforts globally. Now that's the question that we're discussing today. Can a nation or a large oil company do the same and be the leader at the global level? Comparing the emission, as already mentioned, so you see from the graph, it's a little small, but Microsoft emission is some double-digit millions per year. The whole data center industry is maybe 0.3 gigatons per year. The UAE, we said, is about half a gigaton per year, and we're speaking about Scope-3, right? Because that's the hard problem. And the Gigaton Carbon Removal Initiative, by removing 1 million per year, if we'd say we started today, or let's say next year, and we give it 10 years to scale up. Of course, this is not an initiative which is done in a few months. 10 years to get to 1 gigaton. About halfway through, you will have reached the net zero point. So by 2030, UAE would be net zero like Microsoft is by around 2030. So after that, you will remove, every year, you remove more than you emit. And by 2050, the UAE, I say here, the UAE oil and gas industry, okay? Because we'll have removed the entire emissions since the beginning of oil exploration in the UAE. And this by continuing producing oil at the same rate as today. So let's see what if the investments match, or is it something that is feasible? It's not feasible. I said before, all this the investment on the data center side, every company is in the single, sometimes double-digit billions to support this initiative. On the UAE commitments, looking at COP28 and now 29, they are reported at 55 billions by 2030 to reach net zero, which is quite a big number. It's more than on the left side, actually. And by 2050, there are even larger numbers, like 160 billion. So it doesn't look, that's not the issue. I mean, that looks good on that side. And I mention again, like Rashad, the revenue, which is for 1 gigaton, which is 1 million ton, is 1,000 million tons. It will be $10 will give 10 billion per year, $100 will be 100 billions per year. And it has to be compared with investment. And it looks quite good on that side too. Now, yeah, the question remains. The question we want to provide one answer today is that what are the solutions out there? What can we do? Where should we start? As I said before, there are basically two approaches: nature solution, technology solutions, and their key parameters are cost, of course, permanence, and readiness. So can they be scaled? Can they be profitable? And do they keep CO2 out of the atmosphere for a long time? If we do this, we run this analysis and put the different solution on a graph like this, some of them are better than others. So the top right is BECCS, bioenergy carbon capture, biochar. Both, they have high readiness, a low cost, and a high permanence. Forestry is there too. It also has low cost. It's also scalable. The permanence is the duration of the CO2 removal is there sometimes, often an issue. And for this reason, today we will speak about BECCS and this SOFC technology, this fuel cell, because among all these technologies is the only one who is power positive, it is carbon negative, it provides a long duration of carbon storage. It is available commercially today. It has to be scaled up, but it's a commercial solution. It has to be scaled up like solar, wind, batteries, nothing different. And like Mr. Lee will show from FCI, fuel cell can capture carbon at very low cost. And I give just one simple explanation why is that. We want to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Now that's the atmosphere on the left side. It's the big blue circle. Now in the middle, maybe not so well visible, is the CO2. As we well know, today there are 400 something, 440, 420 ppm part per million, which is 0.04% of CO2. Now, everybody you can imagine it's more difficult to extract CO2 from a very diluted place than a more concentrated place. If you extract CO2 from a power plant, from the emission, or a cement plant, or at the emission point, you're better off. You have about 10%. So it's still not a high concentration, still not easy, but better than from the air, easier from the air from a technology point of view. And if you go on the fuel cell side, because there is no combustion, like a battery, that basically the dry exhaust is CO2. So in a simple word, fuel cells separate the CO2, this kind of fuel cell, separate the CO2 automatically and deliver the CO2 separate from the rest of the gas. The consequence or the impact on the solution is that when you work with direct air capture, you have higher cost. You need a lot of energy. You will consume a lot of energy. Advantage is that you can do it everywhere. The atmosphere doesn't care where you remove. That's the advantage. On the point capture, you have a lower penalty, but you still have a penalty of your power plant. Your power plant will lose until like 20% of the power, and you will have to add capex. So that's cost. Okay. The BECCS, they produce power. So bioenergy carbon capture plant produce power profitably, otherwise they would not run, and they capture at the source. They are power positive. Let's remember that we are going to electrify the world. There is a need of electrification. We need solutions that produce power, not that consume power. Okay? And they don't have any sizable penalty of capacity of efficiency. So that's the reason why concentration is important in a different solution. Why some solutions are better than other technology solutions, I'm speaking. And I would like to conclude saying that like today, hopefully we'll come at the end of this presentation and discussion, seeing carbon removal as an opportunity, as a large, profitable market. We'll see that there are technologies available. And just to be sure, every technology is good. Every technology can be profitable, scalable, and with a high duration is good. This combination we discussed today, BECCS plus fuel cell, seems very promising. They are currently already used, by the way, to produce hydrogen, to produce power. So it's not a new solution. It's a solution which has now a new application. And about the impact and the possibility for the UAE, UAE is very well positioned to become a leader in this on this topic with a gigaton carbon removal initiative, which would be a global initiative, bringing the UAE at the same level of leadership like Microsoft and data centers. Thank you very much. Give it back to you, Rashad.
Thank you, Alberto. People will ask what is the capacity of fuel cells that you need to remove 1 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere? And let's compare it quickly to the retired capacity every year. Every year, about 100 to 100 gigawatts of capacity, of producing capacity, is retired. What you need is only 15 gigawatts per year of high temperature fuel cell capacity to reach the goals that we are looking at. And this cost is not a cost, it's an investment. It will pay for itself from the sale of electricity alone. The rest becomes a cherry on the cake. So, Dr. Lee, up to you.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share my screen and all right. My name is Tae-Won Lee. I'm the CEO of the Fuel Cell Innovations in Korea. And this is my great pleasure to introduce SOFC and SOE technologies, and also introduction for our company FCI. And I'd like to use video clip to explain the SOFC technologies. It's going to be 3 minutes, and after that, I will show a couple of slides to explain SOFC technology for carbon capture, which will be a very simple one. All right, the video will start now. Just let me add a couple of the other comments at this point. I just want to emphasize that the SOFC, the first two things, but the first one is SOFC can use LPG, LNG, and syngas, biogas, all the fossil fuels as fuel. And then we can capture carbon from any of the other gas fuels. And second thing is also it can use the green fuels such as hydrogen and ammonia. And also from here, the reversed reaction of the SFC is SOEC, which is electrolyzer cell. And it can use electricity and water to produce hydrogen, and eventually it can convert it to ammonia and e-fuels. I really want to add here that 80% of the cost to make hydrogen comes from the electricity cost. And the cost of the electricity, especially renewable electricity, in MENA region is one of the other cheapest, like the other North Africa or Saudi Arabia or Emirates, Dubai, any place around there, and also the Brazil and the South America. The cost of the PV electricity is only about 3 cents or less than 4 cents per kilowatt hour, so that it makes it very competitive to make the other green hydrogen. And especially MENA has oil, gas, and good renewable energy, so that the combination of using all these sources is really make all the business to be very profitable. Let me make it go again.
The sound is not carrying over, but that's quite all right. We're
Okay.
reading. Yeah. That's... Thank you, Taewon.
All right. Let me move to my couple of slides.
If you would put it in full screen, thank you.
All right. Oops. This is the one.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to show the fuel selectivity in Korea very briefly. Korea is the country pioneered actually all the fuel cell deployments much earlier than the other countries. One fact that I can tell you is about the half of the fuel cells installed in the world is in Korea because Korea started hydrogen and fuel cell subsidy program about 20 years ago. So on those days, POSCO was the company who started the fuel cell business in Korea, and POSCO was the company who constructed the world's biggest factory to manufacture molten carbonate fuel cells. And the molten carbonate fuel cells was the largest product, which is 2.4 megawatts per unit. And then on those days, I was the CTO of the POSCO Energy, and I have been experienced in the construction of the factory and also deployments of the total 172 megawatts in 28 sites, so that we were able to establish all the engineering protocols for the EPC productions and the long-term service and operation and maintenance. And more importantly, we established the global supply chain for the large-scale fuel cells. And this is one of the examples that you can see that multi-floor installation for 60 megawatts or one-floor installation for 50 megawatts. And the last one in the middle is the most beautiful picture that it was the latest one, which is only 20 megawatts. So these are the examples that how Korea was really pioneered all these programs. And I will briefly explain how the CO2 capture is easy by SOFC. This is intrinsic chemical nature of the reaction and the technology. SOFC can concentrate the CO2 from any fossil fuel into the anode exhaust while generating electricity and heat. And the important thing is air or any other gas is not mixed with anode exhaust. So any CO2 concentrated in anode exhaust stays there. So the concentration of the CO2 is proportional to the fuel utilization, and SOFC is the technology developed for high fuel utilization over 80%. Recently, SOFC developers have been focused on the even higher fuel utilization by using several technologies and achieve more than 90%. And it makes the CO2 very easy. So the application is the CO2 can be captured just for 85% of the CO2 or 90% of the CO2 without any additional costs. And we can inject this into the ground. Or
perhaps we can add a couple of words about the shareholders of FCI to show that FCI has large industrial shareholders also who would be part of the
all right, yeah, that'll be followed after these slides. And the CO2 capture, and to make it more economical, CO2 can be captured while blue hydrogen can be produced from fossil fuel. And even more economical way is the CO2 captured by SOFC without purification can be supplied to SOE or co-SOE, co-solid oxide, co-electrolyzer. And then it is a very efficient way to make e-fuels such as aviation fuel, e-gasoline or e-methane, e-methanol, all these. Then once we capture the carbon and reuse it, then this means that we achieve carbon negativity. And usually the people really wants to have the $1 to $1.5 of the production cost of the hydrogen, green hydrogen or blue hydrogen. This is the way to achieve it. Our shareholders are in Korea, it's S-Oil, the oil company, and the Samsung, TNT, and also Dentium, which is a ceramic company. So all those companies are interested in the SOFC and SOE business in the future. So that was the reason why we had Korean companies as shareholders for the future business. And also FCI is a global company with many countries in Korea. And in many countries, Dune is one of the important investors. And also Taknia in Saudi Arabia is also the other one of the important shareholders. Everyone is very focused on the future business with SFC and SOE. So
thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Very informative. Tobias, you have 2 minutes, 3 minutes to describe only the ITMOS. We've gone a little bit over the time. So ITMOS is what's important, the fact that they are the currency that will drive this on the certificates level, together with the income from the sale of power. So that's your ITMOS, please.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Actually, we should have another seminar just on ITMOS once in 2 weeks. The next UNFCCC session in Baku is over. So what we're talking about today is what is the next currency in international emissions trading. It's starting this year, today, and you will hear a lot of it in the upcoming 2 weeks during the conference in Baku. So the new mechanism is based on the Paris Agreement, Article 6. That's also one of the hot topics. In this Article 6, all countries set themselves zero carbon targets. Most 2050, many 2060. So all countries are now covered, and all countries that have a trading target, a reduction target, they can also issue international transferable emission reduction outcomes. Sorry for the funny names. They didn't come up with something better until now. So what is this ITMO? It's, of course, 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. The new thing is this carbon credit is authorized by the host government specifically for international transfer. And once a host government is transferring this emission rights, it has to be added to its emission trajectory in the host country. So it means you cannot just issue this ITMOS, they hurt you. So the host country has an interest to be very careful in issuing these emission rights. That's a forecast by the International Emission Trading Association. And you see the volume is going into the hundreds of $billions. It will start slowly, but the value of the transactions could increase enormously until 2050, when it will be very, very difficult to find easy abatable emission sources. An example how much value this type of emission rights could have already now is a so-called carbon removal credit. And it's currently traded at $125 per ton at NASDAQ. And this is the type of emission rights bought by Microsoft and Google. So what is you should remember about what we were talking? An ITMO needs a government approval. And it has to be additional to business as usual, as CDM emission rights had before. It should be permanent emission reduction, otherwise you get into trouble. It needs a so-called corresponding adjustment, which is an important new word we have all to learn. This means it has to be added to the emission budget of the host country, and it can be deducted from the emission budget of the receiving country. And this will be done by an UN authority. So what we can say about our item today, yes, this is exactly what you should do. Bioenergy, carbon capture is certainly feasible to receive ITMOS because they do not hurt the host country. This is not emissions they have on the screen. They are not, this emission reduction would not lead to any negative impact to the emission budget of the host country. That's why these emission rights are perfectly for early action, because we can be very sure they are valid. So what to do now? See what comes up at the next COP29. We can already assume that all so-called high-value carbon credits will be in one or the other way an ITMO. Already the international aviation will only accept emission rights which are based on the way ITMOs are issued. So it's practically the same. So what you should do already now, think about how your projects could be used to create ITMO, and start now. Don't wait for the details. Fine-tuning can be done later. So overall, what do we expect in investment volume? This is the latest McKinsey study. So it will start with 100 billion, which is nice, but it will go soon into the trillions. And this already in 10 years. I was asked a question on the chat about where this biomass could come from and what is the current emissions of methane in the Emirates. I quickly looked up. That is the latest data from 2019. Waste emissions were 13 million tons in 2019. Let's assume some of it is from transportation of waste. So my rough calculation is 70,000 tons of methane emissions. This is mostly from landfills. Even if the Emirates will start now with waste incineration, this landfill emissions by large will continue for the next decades if nothing is done. So thank you very much. I think I leave more time for the discussion.
Thank you, Tobias. It's worth mentioning that 70,000 tons doesn't sound like much, but methane emissions have global warming factor of 80 over the next 20 years. So you have to multiply by 80 to get the right number in terms of CO2 equivalent. And it's good to remind that FCI is Samsung, and together with Samsung and S-Oil and others, but specifically with Samsung, are more than happy to localize the technology and industry in the UAE, something that practically no other company is willing to do. The companies are ready to sell you the products, but not the technology, which is what the interest here is. So this concludes the formal presentations by three of the world's top authorities in their field. You can look up their CVs and realize the combined experience and expertise that they represent. We can go to questions and answers at this point. We've gone a little bit over the time allocated. We are happy to answer individual questions in writing for anybody who wants to send them. This is just the start of a discussion. Many will need more info to realize that this is feasible today. And we can follow up in writing after that. Somebody asked about data centers in the Gulf region and data centers in the UAE. And perhaps Alberto can address this very quickly in terms of how this can fit within this initiative.
Yes, indeed. Well, data center capacity, especially driven by AI growth, is basically doubling every 3 years, 4 years, and is accelerating. It's really an exponential growth. One of the regions most active in attracting this kind of data center and investments is the MENA regions, particularly the Gulf region, particularly the UAE. And there, if we look about a link or an application of these solutions to put together the growth and the decarbonization, combining the solutions we have seen today would provide to the data center decarbonized energy and also support the growth. And I make only in 20 seconds the one big issue is that today renewables are basically solar and wind. They will triple, they will grow a lot. They have one issue, which is intermittence. There are times at night when there is no wind. Now, for that situations, you have to complement them with something which is controllable. You probably have seen and have heard there is no week that passes without the news of a large data center company signing some deals with nuclear technologies, small nuclear reactor, restarting existing nuclear. Why? Because it is a low carbon or zero carbon source, and it is constant. They really, really need that. Thing is that nuclear will not be here at scale in a short term. It will take 5, 10 years. We are speaking about 2030 to have something big. You can use natural gas, but you have to capture the carbon emissions. Natural gas without capturing the carbon, or any gas without capturing, is not a solution which is viable or wished by the data center. So by using the technology we have spoken today, you can use natural gas and reduce the emission to zero, which would be a viable solution for the UAE. Or you can use, bioenergy and capture the emissions, and you will even deliver carbon removal solution for the data center. So that's where the opportunity stands specifically for oil-producing countries.
We have a quick question about how SOFC technology compares to molten carbonate fuel cell technology. So Dr. Lee, very quickly, and you are on mute right now, if you would unmute yourself.
All right.
But really, 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, there are con and pros between molten carbonate fuel cell and SFC for carbon capture. SFC is more efficient and higher fuel utilization, and no need to add too much of the additional cost to capture the almost more than 90%. But molten carbonate fuel cell has yet another advantage, which can capture the carbon from additional sources. But the molten carbonate fuel cell has only 72 to 75% of the fuel utilization, and it needs some additional equipment to capture the carbon.
I would also say that molten carbonate fuel cells are stationary fuel cells. They are usually put next to power plants, whereas solid oxide fuel cells can be installed anywhere in containerized solution. So you can place them at the injection well and benefit from their electricity by linking it to the grid very easily. Does not require CO2 pipelines to take the CO2 from a power plant to the injection site. A last question, perhaps, and we, again, are more than happy to answer the questions in writing. The competitive landscape, Bloom, FCE, we've touched a little bit about that. Bloom has already deployed about 1.3 gigawatts of fuel cells. FCE is specifically a molten carbonate fuel cell company. This is the Exxon FCE license that was signed a couple of years ago. FCI happens to be the one company that has a expertise in both, plus the solid oxide electrolysis, which makes it the most integrated company on the market. And the competitive landscape was addressed to Dr. Ravani. If he wants to add anything over and above what I said, that would be.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's, the answer was very good. I think the one important aspect, also seeing a question about adoption of this technology in the UAE, there was a question about that, is that what usually happens, these are still top-notch strategic technologies which are developed in the US, in Europe, in Korea. And to transfer them to a new country, it's usually a big deal. So it's usually difficult. Let's say there are difficult negotiations. And so if there is a chance to transfer this technology without just buying products, so if you want to build an industry, I would suggest to cooperate with large companies which are ready to transfer the technology from the technology point of view, really building a technology center. Otherwise, you will end up just buying the product. That's.
My last question, if I may, which is quite important. Where does the biomass come from? CO2 emissions are a global problem, and therefore they require global solutions. And it doesn't matter whether you capture the CO2 in Abu Dhabi or in Brazil. Brazil, the US, India, Africa, China have enormous quantities of biomass. And so if you invest in projects in those countries, you can count the CO2 emissions as part of your budget. And that's where it's important to look at this as a global initiative. And what it requires today is political leadership more so than anything else, because it's a commercially viable solution that can be adopted today at any scale. What doesn't matter, it will produce both the removal of the CO2 and the commercial returns, which are quite substantial compared to other investments. Dr. Saidi, I hand it back to you for perhaps a last few words, and then we can close after that.
Thank you. Thank you. Fascinating discussion. And it's interesting that this is a sophisticated technology, but commercially and economically viable. And I was just thinking, as you were going through, as Dr. Alberto also mentioned, there are massive investments now taking place in data centers. This is very attractive for our region, given that we can use solar power to power the data centers. So I think looking at applications of fuel cell technologies to the data centers could be very interesting in the current years to come. So thank you very much. There is a white paper available, I think, which will be available on our website, I believe, which gives you what are the policy options, how can we go about it, and really the beginning of a roadmap. So perhaps anybody who's interested who watched this webinar can also look at the paper. So thank you very much. Fascinating discussion, and look forward to its applications across our region and beyond.
And we're all more than ready to travel to Abu Dhabi.
Well, I think as you were concluding, it's important that transfer of technology takes place.
Absolutely, and this is
and I think you're open to the transfer of technology.
Exactly. We don't want to sell products.
My ambition for the region, particularly for the GCC, is that we should be exporting technology.
Absolutely.
And exporting products based on renewables and minimizing emissions. So your willingness to transfer the technology, I think, is a good message. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
If I may, just with a couple of
yeah, Roshan.
Yeah, if I may just close us all out here as well. Thank you all very much for very interesting discussions as well. And also thank you to everyone that's joined us online as well for being part of this conversation and for your great questions. And as we said at the CEBC, you know, we do want to be the platform that does inform and enables these dialogues, particularly around new and emerging technologies. And we want to support all of our partners and members to help reach those relevant audiences. So thank you very much to Rashad, Taiwan, Alberto, and Tobias as well for your collaboration for today's session. And this, I guess, this type of collaboration highlights the impact that we can all make and hopefully expand on the technology that you are developing together. And as has been said, yes, the paper is available on the CEBC website under our publications, and any questions that we don't get around to today will be followed up on individually. And as a final note, I'd love to invite everybody who's joined us today to the CEBC Annual Summit, which is taking place on the 26th of November at Expo City, Dubai. And that's just one day dedicated to exploring all of these critical topics, from decarbonisation to energy efficiency, clean hydrogen, climate finance and future mobility. So we hope to see many of you there as well for some continued discussions. And thank you again for joining us. And I hope you all have a great day and a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye-bye.